Welcome everybody to this lesson, HTML tables. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about what uh, data tables are and what they're used for, how we are going to create tables in HTML. So let's just dive right in. So HTML tables allows data to be arranged in rows and columns. So this is an example, right? So you're going to have a table like this with a row and a column, and it's going to have data, right? So person and age is going to be your headers, and then you're going to have each row having data for person and age. So the HTML table has various features which I want to just talk about here. Each table row Then this is each table row is defined by the tr tag, which is table row, and each table header is defined by the th tag. So each table data cell, which is Chris 38, all these ones are data cells, is defined by the td tag. So we are going to look at how we are going to create our tables using this knowledge. So we are going to create a table. So let me just put a comment, sample HTML table, right? So we have to use the table tag for an HTML table. And in here, we can have a style for this table. Let's say we want the width uh, to be 100%. Okay. And in the table, like I said, we have every row. So we are going to define the tr tag. Uh, and the first row, like we all know, the first row of a table is like the header section, right? So this first row that we are defining is going to be your header. So I'm going to have another th saying that this is going to be a header. So this is going to be a first header. I'm going to put first name. And then I'm going to have a second one, th, another header. I'm going to call last name. And then I'm going to have another one. I'm going to call age. Okay, so this is your first row and it has the headers. So your second row normally starts with the data, right? You want to put in the data that you look. So I'm going to define my second row and say instead of th, which is the header, I'm going to put in the data, table data, which is what? td, right? So I'm going to put the first name, Matthew, put td, and this time for the last name, I'm going to put place, and then td age, I'm gonna put 30, right? So this is gonna be your first row of data. Let's just copy this and try and create another row of data. So I'm gonna put Mensa, John Mensa, who's actually was a football player from Ghana. So, and I'm gonna put 40. So this is another data row, right? So I'm gonna save this, refresh this page, and then you have your table, first name, last name, and age. As you can, sorry. So by default, the headers are bold and centered. So you can see that this is centered, right? And then the TD are regular and left aligned. So you can see that they are left aligned, right? So that is by default the way they show. So just to make this complete, let us create the whole HTML. Let's add a doc type. HTML. Let's add our HTML. Let's add our head, and then let's add our body, right? And then we can put this table we have here. I'm going to cut this, and then I'm just going to paste it in here, right? Let me tap this. Good. So we have this. Okay. So if I refresh this, nothing changes, right? So uh, I'm going to try to style this table, right, that we have. And like I said, we can do the external styling. So let's just do the external styling so that we don't forget. I'm gonna put in the link, and then I'm gonna say, this is a style sheet, and then href, and then I'm gonna call the style sheet styles dot css. It can be any name you choose, right? And then I'm gonna close this. Okay, so we have the link to the style sheet. So we have to create the sheet. So I'm going to call it styles.css, right? So I have styles.css. Now, what I want to do here is I want to style the table, the border of this table, right? So in here, I'm just going to say the table. And to style multiple elements at the same time, you can just put commas, th, I want to style the header, and I want to style the data, and then right like this. And then what you want to style the border, and I want to style it as a 1 pixel solid black color, right? So yes, so if I now refresh this, we have borders being placed around the headers, the data, and then the entire table. So the first border you see here is for the table border. And then the header, which is the first name, would have a border. That's the little one in here. And the data is also got another border. So that's why you see multiple borders in here. If you don't like this and you wanted the borders to kind of like collapse into one border, there is a property you can use, and it's called the border collapse. So you can do border collapse and then say collapse, right? So it's going to collapse this into one border, and so you don't have the duplicate borders, as you can see. You could also add some padding if you wanted to pad it, and the padding, like we discussed initially, is the space between the cell content and then its borders, right? So let's pad it. So padding, and then I'm going to pad it by say 10 pixels, right? So it's going to create some space between the cell content and then the borders, as you can see. You can also align the text, right? So uh, let's say you wanted to align hmm, the text for the header to be left aligned. Let's say all this should be left aligned. So you could just say text align. By default, the headers are centered, but you can text align it and say left. Right? You could also say right, but let's see what this is going to be. So you see that they are all aligned left now, right? So this affects all these, but you can specify which ones, right? So I could bring out uh, just the th here if I just wanted this, right? And then let's say I just wanted text align to be, or just wanted this just copy this here, and then maybe I can remove this. And if I refresh it, it's still going to be the same, but it's not going to have the padding, borders, and stuff, right? So you can see, you can specify it individually. So uh, let's just keep it the same, right? And then if I refresh this, I have it back, right? So that's the text align. Another property that you might be interested in is the border spacing, which is the spacing between cells, right? So, uh, and that is the table. So if you wanted a table to have spacing between cells, and maybe I can move this. Let me cut this off and then put it here. Okay, so if I wanted a table to have some spacing, I can put in there the border spacing. And in here, I'm going to say space it by 5 pixels, right? So if I refresh this is not working as intended. And the reason is because a lot of these ones overrode each other. So I'm just going to create a table. And then in here, I'm going to say border spacing, border spacing. And then I'm going to put in there 5 pixels, right? And then if I refresh this, you have the spacing between cells, right? Like you can see here. So that's another attribute that you would want to use. And then we have, if you want to span the cells, right? To make a cell span more than one column, two columns, kind of like merge cells, you can use an attribute that we call the column span. So to have an example of that, I go back to my HTML. I just copied and pasted it so we can edit this. Still the same style sheet. So I'm gonna have first name, and I'm gonna span these two, right? So instead of doing two ths, I'm just gonna have column span and say two columns, right? So I'll put a col span here and say I want it to span two columns, and it's gonna have last name, right? And then I can take out this one, right? So those guys who have two last names can put in here. So I'm gonna have Clays Williams and Mensa Oduro, right? So if I refresh this, you can see that this last name spanned two columns, right? And then you can see the data in there. So that's what the call span does. So we can also have a same feature but for row span, right? So if you wanted a column to span multiple rows, like name, okay, let's make this name span multiple rows. You can have it, but you can have it defined as a row span attribute. So for here, I'm gonna say row span, and I'm gonna say span two rows. So Matthew is gonna span two rows. That means I don't need this one, right? So if I refresh this, you're gonna see Matthew spanning two rows. So it's gonna be Matthew Clays, Matthew Mensah Oduro, Matthew Clays Williams, Matthew Mensah Oduro. So you can span multiple rows and columns, as you can see. Now, most tables have table headings or captions. So we can add a caption. And to add a caption, we simply use the caption tag. So before the first row, we can put a caption tag. And that's going to be the heading of your table. So in here, I can say monthly uh, names from lesson, something like that, right? And then if I refresh this, you can see the heading of the table, and you can style all these as you wish, right? Now, if you wanted to style, have a special style for a particular table, the way you can go around this or about this is to have an ID for the table. So you set an ID for the table and then you style the ID, right? That's like a targeted approach at a specific element or a specific HTML element that you want to target. So what we are going to do is that we are going to add an ID to the table, right? So in here, I'm going to say ID. I'm going to set an ID for this, and I'm going to call it, um, let's say ID table T table one, right? Let's say we call this table one. So we set an ID for this table. Now, because you have set an ID for it, we can now style this table, and it's only going to be affecting table one. So in a circumstance where you have multiple tables in your page or in different pages, you can target each table using ID, right? And we'll talk more about this when we go to CSS, but yeah. So in here, what we are going to do is we are going to go back to our styles, and then we are going to say, because it's an ID we are gonna style, we use the hash and then table one, right? Now, because it's, let me repeat myself, because it's an ID that we are styling, we precede the name of the ID with a hash, right? And that's why we have hash table one. So again, I want to style this. I want to have a width of, oops, let's say 100%. And then what else do I need? Background color. Let's say we want a background color of, what color is this? Brown. So let's just refresh this, and you can see that the table has been styled. So we can have a targeted approach to styling our elements using the ID, right? And I'm just gonna leave it here because I don't want us uh, to talk too deep into this, right? So one more thing that we can do is, if you wanted to target, okay, how do we style each row, even and odd rows, even rows, headers and stuff? Let's try and do that. So we're going to style the even rows, right? So we're going to first select our table, which is the element table one, and then we are going to say the row of table one. So we just add a tr, which means that the table row of table one, right? And then what are we trying to style? We are looking at the nth child, which we'll talk about. So, and then I'm saying the even rows, right? So it says all the row children of this table, look for the even rows, and then let's style that, right? And then in here, I'm gonna say let's style the background color as chocolate, right? So if I refresh this, this is even, right? This is odd. This is even, right? So we can do the same for odd, right? So we can just copy this and say, instead of even, I want the odd rows. And in here, I want to style it differently so we can see the difference. Uh, let's say green something. Okay, let's choose this. And then if I refresh this, you can see that the odd rows have also been styled. Uh, if you wanted to be specific with the header, we can also do that, right? So it's the same technique. We select the table using the hash, and then we select just the header. We just want to style the header, so th, right? And then we are going to say background color, uh, let's say black, TK. And then when we refresh this, we have black. But notice that the writing has disappeared because it's also color black. So I'm gonna make this white. Right. So if I refresh this, you see that. So that's how we style. We target specific fields in our table and then we style it. So that ends the chapter on tables. We talked about the table rows, table data, table headers, captions, borders, aligning our data in our cells, and column span, row span, and the ID, and how we can target each individual element and design our table as we want. So thank you and see you in the next lesson.